The deployment packet hit the steel desk hard enough to rattle the coffee cup, and the young clerk swore he heard the old woman across the room stop breathing. Not the quiet filing lady, not the burden they joked about, not the grandmother told to eat in the kitchen. Reaper 6. Nobody in that annex knew the name yet. The clerk was 22 and thought the old woman had flinched at the noise. She had not flinched. She had gone still the way a deer goes still, the way a pilot goes still when the gauge reads something it should not. Her hands were folded on the edge of the desk. They did not move. Only her eyes moved, down to the brown envelope, to the unit designation stamped across the top, to the 3 words that would, before this packet ever left Florence, put the lives of an entire aviation unit into those folded hands. She did not touch it. Not yet. Across the room, an old man with a maintenance liaison badge and a bad knee looked up from his clipboard. His name was Royce Tillman, and he had been ignoring paperwork at that annex for 9 years. He read the unit number on the packet. Then he read the name on the routing slip, the old woman who filed it. His face did it slow, the way old faces do. Recognition, then disbelief, then something close to fear. He said one word, barely a breath, and it was not her name. We will get to the word. I've spent a long time not saying it, and I am not in a hurry now. My name is Faye Mabry. I am 67 years old. I live in a brick ranch off Cox Boulevard, on the River Bluff side of Florence, Alabama, where the magnolias drop their petals brown across the screen porch every June, and nobody sweeps them up till July. I file paperwork 3 days a week at the Reserve Aviation Support Center out on Florence Boulevard, the Records and Readiness Annex, where they let an old woman alphabetize folders because it is cheaper than a computer and harder to lose. I am a widow. I have 1 son. And until the afternoon that packet hit my desk, the most important thing anybody in my family believed about me was that I had become a problem they would soon have to manage. Let me take you back 3 Sundays before the orders were real, before the word got said out loud. In my family, Sunday dinner was a court. My son Daniel and his wife hosted it at their place across town, the 2-story with the wide kitchen and the island the size of a John boat. And every week I drove the 11 minutes from my side of Florence to sit at the end of their table and be reminded of my decline. My daughter-in-law ran the table. Her name is Delaney Mabry. She is 34, and she is a captain in Army aviation, and she carries herself like the room owes her a salute it has been too slow to give. She is not a stupid woman. I want to be fair to her, because what came later only matters if you understand she was not stupid, only frightened in a way that wore a uniform. She was good at parts of her job. She was better at making a table laugh at somebody who could not laugh back. That somebody was me. It started small, the way these things do. A comment about how I drove too slow on Court Street now. A joke about how I'd asked the same question twice at Thanksgiving. Delaney had a way of narrating me to the others, like a nature program, like I was an animal in winter slowing down where everybody could watch. Faye took the long way again, she would say, smiling, passing the potatoes. We should pin a note to her coat. The table would laugh. My granddaughter, who is 8 and named Wren, and the only person at that table I would walk into fire for, would look up at the laughing and not understand it, and I would wink at her so she would think it was a game. I did not correct them. I had learned a long time ago that correcting people who have decided what you are only gives them more to laugh at. So I sat straight. I folded my hands. I let the silence do my arguing, which is a thing my late commanding officer taught me without ever saying it, just by being the quietest person in any room and the one everyone watched. You want to know what they thought I was, so the rest of it lands. They thought I was a woman who had once played soldier. That was my late husband's family's phrase, the one his mother used at my wedding and the one Delaney inherited like silver. I had served. I had come home from a war nobody in that family ever once thanked me for, and my husband's mother told me to my face, in a kitchen in 1981, that I had played soldier while real women raised children. I was 22. I swallowed it. I swallowed it for 40 years, the way you swallow river water when the boat goes over, because the alternative is to drown louder. I never told them what I flew. I never told them where. I let them think I had typed in an office somewhere overseas and come home with delusions of importance. It was easier, and after enough years, easy becomes true, and the truth becomes a thing you keep in a tin in the back of a closet and do not open. There is a tin, olive drab, the paint worn down to bare metal at the corners, a dent in the lid where it fell off a helicopter skid in 1979. I have not opened it in 11 years. I will tell you what is inside when I am ready to and not before, because I was not ready then either. So, 3 Sundays ago, I knew something was coming because Delaney had been brittle for weeks. Her promotion board had stalled. I heard it through Daniel, who tells me things he should not when he has had 2 beers and feels guilty about his wife. There was money trouble too, a second mortgage on the 2-story, though nobody said that word at the table. She had wanted a deployment for 2 years, a command slot leading her aviation unit overseas, and she had fought for it the way drowning people fight for the side of the pool, and the waiting was eating her. That night, she came to the table already lit up, a glass of wine in her hand before the food was down. Daniel was carving. The kids were loud. I was at my usual place, the end, near the kitchen door. She tapped her glass with a fork. The table quieted. "I have news," she said. "It's not official till the packet drops, but it's coming. My unit's got the rotation. I'm taking my crews overseas in 3 weeks." The table erupted. Daniel kissed her. Her father, who had driven up from Decatur, pounded the island. I said, "Congratulations, Delaney," and I meant it. Because whatever she was to me, the work was real and the work was hard, and I knew exactly how hard in a way nobody at that table could guess. She heard the congratulation. She turned to me with the wine still up. "You know what this means, though," she said, and she said it to the whole table, not to me the way she always did. "It means I'm gone 6 months. Daniel's working. So somebody's got to figure out the Faye situation."
My orders are clear.
The Faye
Stabilize the
situation.
sector and report back
What
to the colonel
situation?
by
I said.
0800.
Quiet.
There is
You
no
can't be
room for
alone
error
out
this
there
time.
on Cox the whole time, Faye. We all know it. The driving, the stove you left on at Easter. She had not let go of the stove. I had turned a burner down, not off, once, and it had become a folktale. I'm not trying to be cruel. Somebody in this family has to be the realist. That's all I've ever been. That is the thing she told herself. The realist. The only honest one at the table. She believed it the way you believe the floor will hold you. "We'll get it sorted," Daniel said, not looking at me, looking at his plate. And then Delaney lifted her glass higher, and she smiled the smile that always got the table. And she said it. To the unit. And to the burden we'll be paying for soon. Somebody's got to fund the assisted living. The table laughed. Not all of them. Daniel did not, but enough of them did. Her father loudest, and the laugh went up into the kitchen light and hung there, and I sat at the end of that table with my hands folded and my back straight, and I let it pass over me like weather. Wren tugged my sleeve. "What's assisted living, Grandma?" "A place for old soldiers," I told her. "Eat your peas." Delaney heard that. Old soldiers. Something flickered behind her eyes. Irritation. Like I had taken a line that belonged to her. She set her glass down. "Faye," she said, and her voice had gone flat and managerial, the voice she used on people who worked for her. "Would you mind eating in the kitchen tonight? My father and I have unit business to go through, and it's officer talk. You'd be bored." The table did not laugh now. Now it just went quiet, which was worse. Daniel opened his mouth and closed it. Her father studied his fork. The realist had said the cruel thing in the honest voice, and nobody had the nerve to call it cruel. I stood up. I'm 67 and my knees are not what they were over the river valley, but I stood the way I was taught to stand, slow and level, no wasted motion. I picked up my plate. I picked up Wren's plate too, because she said she wanted to eat with me, and I was not going to let her see me refuse a child. "Officer talk," I said. "Of course." I carried 2 plates into that wide, bright kitchen, and I sat on a stool at the island while the family ate in the dining room, and Wren chattered about her turtle. And through the doorway, I could hear Delaney narrating her deployment to her father, the routes, the timeline, the river valley her crews would fly when they got in country. Low altitude approach, up a river valley, night work, hard terrain. I stopped chewing. I knew that valley. I knew it the way you know a scar on your own hand. But I said nothing, because saying things had never once helped me at that table, and because the part of me that knew that valley had been sealed in a tin for 11 years, and I intended to keep it there. That was 3 Sundays ago. I drove home the long way down by the bluffs with the windows open and the river smell coming up cool, and I told myself it was over, the way you tell yourself a lot of things at 67 with nobody in the car to argue. It was not over. It was about to begin. Because the deployment Delaney toasted that night, the orders that were not yet official, the packet that would make it real, all of it had to pass through one place before her crews could fly. It had to be filed. Records and readiness. The annex on Florence Boulevard 3 days a week, where they let an old woman alphabetize folders because it was cheaper than a computer, my desk. 12 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon with the air conditioner rattling and a thunderstorm building, brown over the Tennessee River, a courier dropped a stack of routing onto the counter, and a clerk named Bishop carried one brown envelope across the room and set it on the steel desk in the corner where the quiet filing lady worked. He set it down harder than he meant to. The coffee cup rattled, and the old woman across the room stopped breathing. I was looking at a unit designation I had toasted at my son's table 12 days before. I was looking at a river valley approach I had flown when this captain was learning to walk. And over in maintenance, Royce Tillman was rising out of his chair with a clipboard forgotten in his hand and a look on his face like a man who has seen a grave open, crossing the floor toward me, mouthing a word I had buried so deep I had almost convinced myself it was never mine. He stopped at the edge of my desk. He looked at the envelope. He looked at me. "Faye," he said, very low so the clerk would not hear. "Faye, that valley, that's the route." He swallowed. "Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you're not Reaper 6. I did not answer him. Outside, the first of the rain hit the windows. I put one hand flat on the brown envelope, the way you put a hand on a coffin, and I did not say yes, and I did not say no. I did not say yes, and I did not say no, and Royce Tillman did the only decent thing a man can do when he has stumbled onto another person's grave. He stopped digging. "All right," he said. "All right, Faye." He set his clipboard down on the corner of my desk, slow, like it might break. "I'm going to go get my coffee. You take your time with that packet." But he did not go get his coffee. He stood at the window with his back to me and watched the rain come across the river, and I watched him watch it, and the air conditioner rattled, and the brown envelope sat under my hand, warm as a living thing. I want to tell you, I opened it right then. I want to tell you I was brave. I was not brave. I was 67 years old, and I had spent 40 of those years teaching myself not to be Reaper 6, and a person does not unlearn 40 years because a clerk dropped an envelope hard. So I filed it. God help me. I did my job. I slit the envelope with the bone-handled letter opener that has lived in that desk longer than I have, and I logged the deployment packet into the readiness system the way I log 40 packets a week. And I did not let my eyes rest on the route map folded inside it. I stamped it. I routed it. I put Captain Delaney Mabry's unit one step closer to a river valley I knew better than the lines on my own hands, and I told myself it was none of my business. That lasted until Thursday. Royce caught me at the coffee station on Thursday morning. The annex is a low brick building with bad fluorescent light and a hallway that smells like burnt pot and old paper. And he came down that hallway with a folder pressed to his chest and a look on his face I had not seen on a man in a long while. The look of someone who has decided to do a hard thing and is afraid he will lose his nerve before he finishes it. "I pulled something," he said. from the deep archive, the bound logs, the ones from before everything went digital. He glanced down the hall both ways, the way men do when the thing in their hands is bigger than they are. Faye, I wasn't snooping. I was cross-checking the unit's lineage for the readiness file. That's a real task. That's my actual job. And the route they're inheriting, the River Valley, it's got a reference log attached. An originator log. The first crew that ever flew it and brought the data home. He opened the folder on the counter beside the coffee pot, there in that ugly hallway, and he turned it so I could see. It was my handwriting. Younger, firmer, the letters standing up straighter than they stand now, but mine. The slant of the F. The way I cross a 7 like the Europeans taught us downrange. A flight log, page after page, the route flown and timed and annotated in the hand of a woman who was 28 years old and certain she would live forever. And at the top of the originator page, in the block where they print the aircraft commander's call sign, 2 words, Reaper 6. That's not me, I said. Royce did not argue. He is too old and too kind to argue with a drowning woman about whether she is wet. He just left the folder open on the counter and looked at me with those watery blue eyes. And he said, Faye, I crewed birds for 31 years. I know a pilot's log when I read one, and I know your handwriting from 9 years of your filing slips. He tapped the page, gentle, once. You don't have to tell me anything, but you and I both know whose hand that is, and we both know that captain of yours is about to fly that exact route in 3 weeks. She's not my captain, I said. No, he said. I expect she's not. And he left the folder there and went back to his maintenance bay, and I stood alone in that hallway with the coffee going bitter in the pot, and 40 years coming up the back of my throat like river water. I closed the folder. I did not take it, but I did not put it back in the deep archive either. I carried it to my desk and I set it in the bottom drawer under a box of paper clips, and I told myself I was only keeping it safe, which is the kind of thing you tell yourself right before you do something you have spent half your life swearing you would never do. That night, I drove home the long way again, down by the bluffs on Cox Boulevard, with the magnolias dropping their brown petals across the road in the headlights, and I sat in my driveway with the engine off for a long time. The brick ranch was dark. Howard has been gone 6 years, and the house is too quiet now, and I have learned to fill it with the radio and the kettle and the small sounds a person makes to prove they are still in a place. I went in. I turned on the porch light. And then, for the first time in 11 years, I went to the back of the bedroom closet and I got down the tin. Olive drab, the paint worn to bare metal at the corners, the dent in the lid where it came off a helicopter skid in 1979, and a crew chief named Vasquez caught it before it rolled into the dust and handed it back to me and said, "Ma'am, you'd lose your own head if it weren't screwed on." And I laughed because I was young, and the war had not yet taught me what it costs to lose things. I set the tin on the kitchen table under the hanging light. I put my thumb on the snap. I did not open it. Not that night. But I sat with my hand on the snap for the better part of an hour, and in my cardigan pocket, my other hand found the thing it always finds when I am frightened, a small worn knob of brass, an altimeter knob thumbed smooth as a river stone, and I held it the way some people hold a cross, and I will tell you what it is when I am ready, and not before. Then I put the tin in my work bag. I do not entirely know why. I told myself I was only moving it. I am telling you the truth as I knew it then, which is that I did not yet know what I meant to do. Friday. I knew. Friday morning, the unit's planning cell sent over their approach package for the readiness file, the actual operational plan, the route as Delaney's people intended to fly it, and it came across my desk to be logged and filed like everything else. And because Royce's folder was sitting in my bottom drawer under the paper clips, and because the tin was in my bag at my feet, and because a person can only hold her thumb on a snap for so many years, I did the thing I should not have done. I read it. I spread Captain Delaney Mabry's approach, plan flat on the steel desk, and I read the river valley the way I read it 40 years ago, ridge by ridge, the low altitude run up the cut, where the terrain hides you from anyone who might be watching, and the air does strange things in the dark. Fuel points, turn references. The hard left where the valley narrows and the rotor wash comes back off the rock at you, and you fly more by the feel in your hands than by anything the gauges will tell you in time. And I went cold, because the plan was wrong. Not wrong by much, wrong by one ridgeline. The approach had them holding their low run a single fold of terrain too long before the turn, riding the wrong shoulder of the valley toward the narrows, and any pilot reading a chart in a bright, clean room in daylight would never catch it, because on the chart, the two ridges look like brothers. They are not brothers. One of them gives you room to make the turn. The other one does not. The other one tightens on you in the dark with the wash coming back off the rock, and by the time the terrain tells you the truth, your hands have already run out of valley. I knew this because I had flown the wrong ridge. I had flown it on a night in 1979 with a full bird and people in the back who were counting on me to read the dark correctly. And I had ridden that wrong shoulder toward the narrows believing the chart. And the only reason I am sitting in a brick ranch off Cox Boulevard, 67 years old, telling you this story is that the woman in the left seat beside me knew the valley better than the chart did. And she put her hand over mine on the controls, and she said one word, low, calm, the calmest voice I have ever heard in my life, and that word turned us off the wrong ridge and onto the right one with the rock close enough to count the seams. That was Major Esther Coyle. I have not said her name in this story yet. I am saying it now because you need it, and because saying it costs me something, and because the whole rest of what happened turns on her the way a door turns on a hinge. She was my commanding officer, and she was the finest terrain pilot I ever flew beside, and she taught me everything I know by saying almost nothing, just being the quietest person in any room, and the one everyone watched. After that night, she took the route apart with me on the ground, the two of us on our knees over a chart with a grease pencil, and we built the approach the right way, ridge by ridge, fuel point by fuel point, the version that does not kill you in the narrows. I drew the overlay, the hand-annotated acetate, the route laid over the terrain in my own straight-up letters, the correct shoulder marked, the turn marked, the place where the valley lies to you marked with a small grease pencil star, and 3 words in Coyle's blockier hand. That overlay was in the tin at my feet, and the plan on my desk. The plan Delaney's bright, clean planning cell had built for crews who trusted it with their lives, had them on the wrong ridge. I sat very still. Outside, the rain had cleared, and the light through the annex windows had gone the thin gold of a Florence afternoon in June. And across the room, Royce Tillman looked up from his bench, because old soldiers can feel it in a room when something has changed, and he saw my face, and he set down his wrench. The question came up in me plain as a gauge reading, and it would not go away, and it has not entirely gone away since. Did Delaney's people copy a flawed chart? And was there anybody left alive in this whole world besides one old woman they had told to eat in the kitchen? Who knew where the valley lies to you in the dark? I reached down into my bag. I put the tin on the steel desk beside the plan. I put my thumb on the snap. This time I did not stop. The snap gave with a small, dry sound, the sound a thing makes when it has been closed so long it has forgotten how to be open, and the lid came up on its tired hinge, and the smell came out of it. You will not understand this unless you have kept something sealed too long. It is not a bad smell. It is old acetate and grease pencil and the faint mineral ghost of a country that is half a world away and 40 years gone. And it went into me like a key into a lock I had welded shut on purpose. The overlay lay on top where I had folded it the last time my hands were young. I lifted it out by the edges, the way you lift something you are afraid to wake, and I unfolded it under the hanging light. And there it was. The river valley in my own straight letters. The ridges drawn true. The narrows, the hard left where the wash comes back off the rock, and the small grease pencil star, and beside it, in Esther Coyle's blockier hand, 3 words that I had not let myself read in 11 years. Not here, not yet. I laid the overlay over Captain Delaney Mabry's approach plan on my own kitchen table, the brick ranch quiet around me and the magnolia tapping the window in the night breeze off the bluffs. And I lined the 2 up by the river, because the river never lies. The river is the one thing on any chart that is exactly where God put it. And when the rivers matched, the routes did not. There it was, plain as a gauge. Delaney's plan held the low run one ridge too long. It rode the wrong shoulder toward the narrows, the brother ridge, the liar, and it made the turn a heartbeat too late, in the place where a heartbeat is the whole of your life. My overlay turned a fold of terrain sooner. My overlay lived. Hers did not. I sat there a long while with my 2 maps become one map under the light, an old woman in a cardigan with her dead commander's handwriting under her thumb, and I understood that I was no longer deciding whether to remember. I had remembered. The only thing left to decide was what a person does with a thing she swore she would carry to the grave, when the grave turns out to have a door in it, and the door opens on a captain who called her a burden, and 3 weeks of clean Florence evenings between that captain and a ridge that does not forgive. I did not sleep. I want to be honest about that, because people imagine that when the old finally face the thing, there is peace in it, and there was no peace in it. There was the kettle at 2 a.m, and the radio low, and my thumb going over and over the smooth brass knob in my cardigan pocket. The one I have not told you about yet. The one Esther Coyle pressed into my hand on a morning I will get to, and I held it the way you hold the hand of someone who is not in the room anymore. In the morning, I drove to the annex on Florence Boulevard with the tin in my work bag and the overlay folded inside it, and a thing decided that I had no name for yet. The annex was just waking, the bad fluorescent light flickering on down the hall, the coffee going acrid in its pot, Royce Tillman already at his bench with his glasses down his nose. I did not go to my desk. I went to the back of the records bay, to the row of gray cabinets nobody opens, the deep archive, the bound logs, and the sealed reference files from before everything went into a machine. And at the end of the row, there is a cabinet I have walked past 3 days a week for 9 years and never once tried, because it is locked, and because the only thing on it is a strip of yellowed label tape with one word typed on it: Coyle. I had told myself for 9 years that it was a coincidence of names. There are a great many Coyles in this army. I had told myself that the way I had told myself a great many things. But I stood in front of it that morning with my heart going like a young woman's. And I did the arithmetic I had refused to do. And I went and got the key ring off the hook by the readiness desk where it has hung the entire time. And the small brass key with the worn shoulder turned in that lock like it had been cut from my hand. Inside, in order, in her hand, was provision. That is the only word I have for it. Major Esther Coyle had spent the last good years of her service quietly sealing into the unit's permanent reference file every scrap of what the 2 of us learned in that valley, labeled in her blocky print, dated, signed, filed, not for a board and not for a medal, but, in her own words on the cover sheet, for the next crew that flies it, the route data, the fuel point math, redone clean, the long-range tanks and the burn rates, and the place where you commit or you turn back because there is no third choice in the narrows. And underneath all of it, in a flat envelope soft with age, a second copy of the overlay, my overlay. She'd made herself a copy of my work and kept it safe for 40 years against the day a young crew would inherit the valley and need an old crew's hands. I had spent 40 years believing I had come home from a war that did not want me and had filed myself away in a tin and been forgotten. And the whole time, 3 feet off the floor in a gray cabinet in Florence, Alabama, a woman who was gone had been keeping a place set for me at a table I never knew existed. You were valued all along. I sat down on the cold tile of the archive bay with the envelope in my lap, and I put my face in my hands. And I am not ashamed to tell you that an old woman wept on the floor of a records annex while the coffee burned down the hall. Then I got up, because Coyle would have gotten up, and I went to work. I spread it all across the steel desk, her file and my tin and Delaney's plan, and I rebuilt the approach the way the two of us built it on our knees with a grease pencil a lifetime ago. I checked the fuel points against the burn. I walked the route from memory, ridge by ridge, my finger on the acetate, my lips moving, the turn references coming up out of the dark of me, where they had waited all this time, perfect, unworn, because terrain you have flown for your life does not fade the way a face does. And every line confirmed the same hard thing. Delaney's planning cell had copied a flawed chart, an old reproduction with the brother ridges drawn alike, and they had built a whole crew's faith on it. They did not know. There was no way for them to know. The truth was in a tin and a locked cabinet, and the only two people who had ever read it correctly were one dead and one filing folders in the corner, because it was cheaper than a computer. It was that morning that I met the boy. I call him a boy. He was 23, a specialist named Ruiz, and the planning cell had sent him over to the annex to chase down lineage paperwork for the readiness file. And he came into the records bay pale and stiff, the way the very young get when they are carrying a fear too big to set down. We got to talking the way you do over a counter, and it came out of him sideways, the way the real things always do. He was flying the night route, his first deployment, and he was afraid of the dark valley in a way he could not say to his crew, because you cannot say it to your crew, and he had no one else. And an old filing lady is safe to be afraid in front of because she does not count. I have been not counting for 40 years. I know exactly what it is good for. I reached into Esther Coyle's file and I took out her training notes, the ones she wrote plain and patient for crews who would never meet her. How you fly the narrows by the feel in your hands when your eyes have run out of valley. How you trust the turn and not the fear. And I read them to that frightened boy across the counter in the bad fluorescent light. And I watched something in his shoulders come down off the high shelf where he had been carrying it. He did not know whose words they were. He did not know the woman reading them to him had flown the route the notes described on the night the notes were learned. He only knew that someone somewhere, a long time ago, had been afraid in that exact valley and had lived, and had bothered to write it down kindly for him. He thanked me. He called me ma'am. He went back to his cell standing straighter than he came, and I thought, Esther, you are still flying. You are still up there in the dark, putting your hand over the hands of frightened children. I just sat there and let you. Royce had been watching all of it from his bench. When the boy was gone, he came over slow, wiping his hands on a rag, and he looked at the steel desk, at the tin open and the overlay out, and Coyle's file spread around it like a fan, and he did not say anything clever. He has earned the right not to. He had been grounded years ago, set on a shelf and shamed for it, kept barely on the rolls, and he told me once it was the worst thing that ever happened to a healthy man, to be made to feel like dead weight while you can still lift. I knew now, looking at Coyle's file, who had quietly kept him on those rolls. Her name was on the endorsement. She had not let them throw him away either. He saw me see it. His chin worked. She did that, he said very low. All this time, I thought somebody just forgot to cut me. She didn't forget anybody, I said. That was the whole of her. That was the morning Captain Delaney Mabry walked into the annex. She came for the readiness file in her flight suit, her hair pulled back hard, that bright, competent voice already going before the door had shut, asking the front clerk for the approach package by name. Every inch the officer, and underneath it, if you have ever been afraid yourself, you can hear it in another person. The thin, high wire of someone who is drowning and cannot let it show. She did not see me at first. I was the filing lady in the corner, I am furniture to her. She was halfway across the bay with her hand out for the folder when Royce Tillman set down his rag and stood up from his bench and came to the middle of the floor and stopped. I knew what he was going to do before he did it, and I could not have stopped him with a shout. He came to attention. Royce, who has not stood like that in years, whose back does not allow it, brought himself up straight as a young man in front of God and the captain and the clerk and the burning coffee. And he turned to face me in the corner, and he raised his hand in a salute so slow and so exact it was less a gesture than a confession. The bay went quiet. Delaney stopped with the folder in her fingers and stared at the old maintenance man saluting the woman who alphabetized her paperwork, and her face did the thing a face does when the world tilts under it. "Chief," she said, "what are you doing?" Royce did not lower his hand. He kept his eyes on me, and his voice did not shake, though the rest of him did. "Captain," he said, "this is Reaper 6. He let it sit one breath in that ugly fluorescent room. "Reaper 6 flew that valley before your captain could walk." The room did not move. The clerk had stopped with his hand on the copier, and the coffee went on burning down the hall, and Delaney Mabry stood in the middle of the records bay with the folder half out of her fingers and her mouth open on a word she did not have. I watched her try to make Royce Tillman's sentence into something it was not. I watched her look for the joke in it. There was no joke in it. There was only an old maintenance man with his back held straight against everything it cost him, and his hand at the brow of a worn face, and his eyes fixed on the woman in the corner who alphabetized the readiness binders and was told on Sundays to take her plate to the kitchen so the officers could talk. "That's a clerical name," Delaney said finally. Her voice had lost its bright, clean edge. "Reaper. There are records that get tagged like that. It doesn't mean—" "It means," Royce said, and lowered his hand at last, slow. "The way you set down something heavy you have carried a long road, that the river run your cell is about to fly belonged to her crew before there was a cell. Before there was a you, Captain. You can call the lineage desk in Montgomery if you'd rather hear it from a man with bars on. Or you can let her show you, since she's standing right there, and she's the last one breathing who flew it. I will tell you the truth, which is that I did not want to be shown. 40 years I had folded that name down small enough to fit in a tin, and a part of me that morning still wanted nothing more than to pick up the binder Delaney had come for and hand it across the counter and be furniture again, because furniture is safe, and furniture does not get told twice in one life that it is dead weight. But the boy's face was in me. Ruiz, standing straighter than he came, and the 3 weeks were in me. 3 clean Florence evenings between a captain and a ridge that does not give your error back. So I did the thing instead. "Captain Mabry," I said, and my own voice surprised me, because it came out level, the way it used to come out over a headset when the floor was falling out of the world. "Bring the approach package to the conference room. Bring your planning cell. I'd like Specialist Ruiz in there too, if he can be spared." She came. I have wondered since why she came, when she could have walked out and called me senile and been within the bounds of everything she believed. I think it was the only honest thing left in her by then, the small, drowning animal under all that competence, the part that had been screaming for somebody, anybody, to be more right about the dark valley than she was. She came, and her cell came. 4 young officers with tablets and that scrubbed certainty the very young carry into rooms they have never bled in. And Royce came, and the boy Ruiz came and stood by the door like he wasn't sure he was allowed. I set the tin on the long table. I had carried it across Florence that morning in a canvas work bag, and I set it down on the laminate beside their printed approach package, the olive drab paint worn to bare metal at the corners, and I worked the snap, and this time my hands did not shake at all. I lifted out the overlay. I unfolded it under the long fluorescent tubes, the acetate gone the color of weak tea at the edges, my own straight letters and ester coils blockier hand, and I laid it flat. Then I took their chart and I laid my overlay over the top of it, and I lined the two up by the river, because I have already told you, the river is the one honest line on any map God ever let a person draw. Match them on the water, I said. Always the water. Everything else on a chart can be a lie somebody copied from an older lie. The water is where it is. When the rivers lay over each other, the roots did not, and I watched 4 young faces lean in and see it. I put my finger on the place. Your run holds the low shoulder here, one ridge too long. This ridge and that ridge are brothers. On a clean day, you'd never confuse them. At night, low, on instruments with the valley narrowing on you, you will trust the one that kills you because it looks exactly like the one that doesn't, and the chart you copied drew them the same. You make your turn here. I moved my finger a fold of terrain sooner, not where the plan says, here. And your fuel point is wrong by enough to matter, because somebody ran the math on the long route, and on the long route you commit before you can turn back. I've redone it. I laid Coil's sheets out beside the overlay, her clean, patient figures, the burn rates, the place where there is no third choice. It's all here. It's been here 40 years. A major named Esther Coil sealed it into your own permanent file for the next crew that flew it. You've been standing on her work and you didn't know her name. One of the young officers said quietly, "Ma'am, how do we know the overlay's right and the package is wrong?" It was a fair question. It was the only fair question. And I did not have a board's answer for him. I had only the thing itself. So I told him the plain truth, because I made the package's mistake once, on a real night, and the helicopter got hit twice, coming through the Narrows, and we should not have lived through what came after. And the person who flew us out of it and then spent the rest of her life making sure no other crew would make that turn too late is the reason there's an overlay at all. I put my hand flat on the acetate. I am telling you the ridge is wrong because I am the one it nearly took. Delaney had not said a word. She was looking at the 2 maps become one map, and her hands had come up to the edge of the table, and I saw it go through her, the whole arithmetic of it. The thing she could not stop seeing now that it was seen. Her crews, the boy by the door, her own self in the lead aircraft, 3 weeks out, riding a plan into the dark on a wrong ridge with her name on the orders. And in the corner of the room, the burden, the one they'd be paying for soon, holding all of it in 2 folded hands. I picked up the grease pencil from my bag. I signed the overlay across the bottom under my old letters, the way Coil taught me to sign a thing you are making official, and I slid it across the table to Captain Delaney Mabry, and I did not say it cruelly. I want that understood. I said it the way you hand someone the rail on an icy step. It's yours now. Enter it as your reference. Fly it the way I flew it. She looked at the overlay with my name on it, and she looked at me, and the bright, clean officer was gone entirely. And what was left was just a tired, frightened woman about 30 years younger than me, who had been so afraid of not being enough that she had made a Sunday ritual out of standing on someone smaller. "Why?" she said, and her voice broke on the one word, "Why would you give me this?" "After I called you." She couldn't finish it. To her credit, she could not make herself say it again in that room. And here is the second thing I had carried, the thing I had never told a living soul, and I will tell it now the way I told it to her. Lo, just the 2 of us inside a room full of people. I took the brass knob out of my cardigan pocket, the worn altimeter knob I have thumbed smooth over 40 years of sitting at the edges of other people's tables, and I set it on the acetate. This was hers. Esther Coil pressed it into my hand the morning we walked out of that valley alive, and she told me to keep it where I could reach it, so I'd always know which way was up when the instruments lied. I had to stop a moment. She didn't come back from that ridge, Captain. The route was hers and mine, and the night we proved it true, it cost her. I never told anyone the call sign because to me it was never a thing you win with. It was where she's buried. Every time somebody said Reaper 6, I heard the worst night of my life, so I let it be a clerical name. I let myself be the filing lady. It was easier than saying her name out loud. I touched the knob and pushed it across to sit beside the overlay. But a grave that saves the next crew isn't only a grave. She knew that. She filed all this for you when you were a child she'd never meet. The least I can do is stop hiding the map. Delaney Mabry put her hand over her mouth, and the captain wept in front of her own cell, and nobody in that room thought less of her for it, least of all me, because I have done my weeping on a cold tile floor, and I know it is not weakness. It is the body finally setting down a weight the mind held too long. What happened after happened the way real things happen, in paperwork, which is the truest place a thing can happen in this army. The corrected overlay did not go back in a tin. It went into the system. Royce Tillman walked it himself to the readiness officer, and the unit's official approach reference for the River Valley Run was amended. And on the cover sheet, in the block that names the originator of record, they typed a name that had spent 40 years in a locked drawer, Faye Mabry. Beneath it, because I asked, and because Delaney signed the request before I'd finished asking, they entered Major Esther Coyle as co-originator, so that the next young officer who pulls that file and wonders who to thank will have two names to thank instead of none. And Royce, I made them fix Royce too. I sat down at my own steel desk and I drafted the memorandum and I cited Coyle's old endorsement, the one that quietly kept a grounded man on the rolls when the world wanted to throw him away. And I made the case that a maintenance liaison who can recognize a pioneer's name on a 40-year-old log is precisely the institutional memory you do not retire. They kept him. He came by my desk after and didn't say anything clever. He just put his old hand flat on the steel a second and nodded and went back to his bench, and I heard him whistling, which I had never once heard him do. Delaney flew the Valley 3 weeks later. She flew it the way it was drawn on the acetate, the turn a fold sooner, the fuel committed where the math actually allowed, and her crews came home. All of them, including a specialist named Ruiz, who I am told held the night route steady as a veteran and never knew that the calm voice of the training notes in his head had belonged to a woman dead 40 years and an old lady who'd read them to him over a records counter. Delaney came to Sunday dinner the week she got back. She did not narrate my decline. She set a chair at the middle of the table, and she waited until I sat in it. But that is not the picture I want to leave you with, because the cycle does not close at a dinner table. It closes at a desk. There was a new tin in the supply cabinet, olive drab, the snap still stiff and bright. I had Ruiz in mind from the first. A boy that green will be a planner himself one day, and planners need something to open when the dark comes up the valley at them and the chart lies. She sealed the tin, wrote the boy's name across the lid, and set it on the steel desk. Reaper 6 still flies.